Hello and welcome to the Red Zone podcast, talking about tight ends and tight end analysis. I'm Big Italy 42. He is Scott Mailwig at Sports 25 to Life, and obviously you wrote up this great piece, and as everyone should, and you did, of course. Rob Gronkowski is the first tight end mentioned. He's doesn't matter his price, right?
No, not really.
It's just Rob Gronkowski, so you just play him.
I mean, the way I look at it is he's been as good as Antonio Brown and Julio Jones and stuff like that. And he, even when he's ridiculously priced for a tight end, he's still underpriced compared to them. And I mean, he's just so consistent. He hasn't even really been a huge target guy yet, and he's had two massive games already. I mean, he's going to have like a 15 target game coming at some point. You got to think when people actually start covering Julian Edelman, hopefully. Yeah. And there's not a ton of other weapons on the offense. I mean, I am expecting him to play pretty well every single week this year.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it's not even the fact that he's had volume. He's just so efficient with the looks that he does get. And that's a great point about his price compared to the wide receivers, because people look at it compared to the tight ends and get scared away. But I certainly will be getting him into my cash games as much as I possibly can this week.
Yep.
And, I mean, this one's just simple. No more analysis necessary. He's the best play. If you can get him, get him. If not, then you got to find your values that you feel good about. And hopefully, if you're not getting Gronkowski, you're replacing him with an elite player at some other position. Because if you're not, then you're certainly doing it wrong. First value you have highlighted here, one of my favorites on the week, is Greg Olson, guy that a lot of people, due to recency bias, were completely off last week after a subpar week one. We had a touchdown called back, ended up with just one catch, but facing off against the Saints this week, and as we've seen, this is not a very good Saints defense at all. I mean, it hasn't been a good defense in years. I think that Rob Ryan's just the coordinator because his last name's Ryan, and these guys don't ever get fired. But this is a terrible defense, and as we know with the Carolina offense, there's not a lot of weapons on this offense at all. So Greg Olson's still the go-to guy in the passing game. Really no one is emerging. We saw Ted Ginn has had a couple okay performances, but he's not a guy you can rely on for volume. So Greg Olson's still the focal point of this offense.
Yeah, I mean, 14 targets last week. He only caught 6 because Cam Newton's been having trouble throwing it and hitting the broadside of a barn. I mean,
he likes to run.
Yeah, I mean, he's throwing a decent amount. He's just not – he hasn't been accurate. He's never really been accurate in his career, but he's definitely been better than he has been in the first 2 games. If he improves that just a little bit, I mean, we're looking at a lot of 8-9 catch games from Olson. He's got to be their number one red zone target until Funchess comes around. So, I mean, I feel pretty good about this. I mean, it's a really solid cash game play, probably the way I would go if I'm not going Gronk for the most part. Only 4,800 on DraftKings, under 6K on FanDuel. He's priced pretty well everywhere after that poor week 1 game. And, I mean, he was good last week, but not, like, good enough to jump his price back up. On FanDuel, I think he was right around 10 points. I think he was, 13 on DraftKings. So, I mean, nothing crazy, but that's a really solid performance for those prices. And there's definitely some upside with touchdowns and more catches and stuff like that. So I think he's a rock solid option.
Yeah, I completely agree. Right around $2,500 cheaper than Gronk on both sites, like you said. So if you have to have the value, maybe it helps you get a more stable quarterback or a top-end wide receiver. Not the worst way to go, but like you said, still going to try to get Gronk when we can. A guy who's probably going to be a sexy pick this week as a value play, Crockett Gillmore from the Ravens. Not only has the best name of any tight ends in the league, but caught a couple touchdown passes last week. And while obviously we're not going to expect that type of game flow in this game, as we saw against a terrible Raiders defense and what it eventually became a shootout, but at his price, $3,300 here on DraftKings, facing off against the Bengals here. And, you know, the Bengals have been an okay defense, but still not one that defends the tight end position very well, especially with Vontaze Burfict out still. So this is a great value play that, I mean, it has upside. Maybe not quite the upside we saw last week, but he certainly does have upside.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the Ravens don't really have any other, like, guys that need targets outside of Steve Smith, really. So, I mean, there's definitely a role to be had there for him, especially as a red zone target and over the middle. So, I mean, I'm thinking he has a pretty nice season the rest of the way. Cincinnati, like you mentioned, a middle-of-the-road defense, nothing really to worry about there. You got to think that they focus on Steve Smith and the running game for the most part. So Gilmore should have another nice week, especially for his really low prices. I mean, he's a really solid value play with some nice upside. Like you said, probably not looking at the upside he had last week, but maybe a couple more targets. And, I mean, that's more than enough for what his price is right now.
Yeah, seems like a low-risk, medium-reward type of play at that price. And then next up, a guy who was a great value last week, and I mean, he's been targeted a ton. It's Heath Miller for the Steelers, obviously going up against St. Louis here. Le'Veon Bell's back, so that's going to take a little bit off of his potential. Obviously, you're not going to see quite as many targets. Bell's a big factor in the passing game as well. But, I mean, he's the number one red zone threat outside of Antonio Brown. And this is an offense that's putting up points in bunches, even without Le'Veon Bell. So he's still going to see his looks in the red zone as he does because, I mean, if you're an opposing defense and the Rams are a good front seven, if I'm the Rams, I try to take away Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell in the red zone, and that's going to easily leave open Heath Miller. But it's easier said than done, of course, because it's not easy to stop either one of those guys.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it sounds like the Steelers are going to go for 2 a ton this year too, which adds some nice equity to some of these red zone targets like Miller and Brown and Bell.
Good point.
I mean, he's just so cheap and he's so consistent. Obviously, Roethlisberger trusts him. They've been playing together for like 175 years now. So, I mean, you know what you're getting from Heath Miller. He's going to catch the passes that are thrown to him that he should catch. He's a really quality red zone target that runs really good routes. I mean, he's a great cash game play for 3,500 if you're not looking to spend any money at tight end. I mean, he's really, really cheap. And, I mean, the Steelers' offense has looked as good as anyone, so you got to assume they're going to put a lot of points on the board, especially with Bell coming back. And with the extra 2-point conversion chances, I mean, you got to think they get 2 or 3 of those a game. And when he's down there, he's about a third of the targets. So, I mean, he's got a good chance at a 2-point conversion every game now. I mean, there's a lot to like at his price. I don't like him as much as Greg Olson, but I do like him quite a bit as a cash game play for a value.
Yeah, and it certainly helps him that's a very suspect defense that Pittsburgh has, especially their secondary. So, got to imagine that teams will be able to put up some points, and they'll need to continue scoring like they did in the first 2 weeks. So, next up, you got Jimmy Graham as the GPP play. Got to imagine he's going to have really low ownership. Another one of these recency bias people. Still one of the more talented guys, but he was vocal about not liking his role in the offense last week and going up against the Bears defense, which might quite possibly be the best matchup for any offense in the entire NFL. So Jimmy Graham, due to his high price and the fact that he didn't produce recently, not really his fault. He wasn't targeted very often, but Jimmy Graham, definitely a guy with some big-time upside still.
Yeah, he looked good in week 1. I mean, he wasn't fantastic or anything, but he got 6 of 8 targets for almost 60 yards and a touchdown. The Bears were dead last against tight ends last year, and they're pretty much dead last against everything defensively.
They're going to be dead last at quarterback now, too.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great matchup. The only concern you have is the Seahawks getting up really early in this game because the Bears can't score and them just running it. I mean, that's what makes him a GPP play for me. The matchup, the price, all of it is pretty good, honestly, outside of the 2-target game last week. So I like him quite a bit, but I do have concerns about the Seahawks just getting up 14-0 and handing it to Marshawn Lynch 30 times the rest of the game. So, I mean, there's definitely some concerns there, but I also think he's a great GPP play because of the ownership.
Yeah, certainly. As long as Jimmy Clausen isn't scoring points for the Seahawks defense, touchdown-wise, then there'll definitely be plenty to go around. Speaking of the Bears, Martellus Bennett, the only real reliable, healthy target that they have in the passing game outside of Matt Forte. He gets targeted a lot. Obviously, this one's going to be a deep GPP play because Jay Cutler, I don't even think he's been officially listed as out, but no one really expects him to play this week. Jimmy Clausen is going to be looking for his security blanket. It's not a great offensive line that's going to give him much time to throw, especially against this defense that's now adding Cam Chancellor back. So I'm expecting a lot of volume, a lot of dump-off passes to guys like Forte and Martellus Bennett in this one.
Yeah, me too. I mean, it's not a great matchup. Obviously, the Seahawks are one of the best defenses in the NFL. Cam Chancellor is going to be back. So, I mean, that's why this is a GPP play and not a value play for me. But, I mean, the targets should be there no matter who's playing quarterback. There just aren't a lot of other weapons, especially wide receiver. They don't really have much of anything. Eddie Royal was their number 1 wide receiver last week and did basically nothing. So I think you're going to see a ton of volume from Bennett and Forte also.
Yeah, I completely agree there. And then Gronk Jr., Travis Kelce for the Chiefs here. Your next one, you've got him against the Green Bay Packers, who they haven't been a terrible defense, but they're not a very good defense. I'd say they're maybe above average at best. And obviously he's still the top upside target. I mean, you've got Jeremy Maclin there now, which takes a little bit of pressure off him that we saw last year. Easier to key on him. But he's got a fine matchup. The Chiefs have been moving the ball. Obviously, week 1, kind of at the exception of the rule with the big performance he had. But somewhere in the middle of his week 1 and week 2 performances seems like a good bet for Travis Kelce this week.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, he's top 3 in basically everything at tight end except targets right now. So if the targets go up at all, he's going to be in really good shape. He's like first in catch rate, second in yards, second in touchdowns. I mean, there's a lot to like here. I think as long as he keeps playing nearly 100% of the snaps, he's going to be a pretty elite play at tight end for as long as he's doing that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And then next up, Jason Witten, who apparently had injured every part of his body in the last game and still produced at his rightful age of, I don't know what he is now, 36, 37. Whatever it is now. I mean, the guy is just over-reliable. He's not completely healthy. There was some speculation that he is questionable for this week, but I don't remember a time, literally in my entire lifetime, where Jason Witten didn't play due to an injury. So Jason Witten, a guy that you can rely on him. He's going to be a popular target for Brandon Weeden, obviously with Des Bryant out and Tony Romo out now. I mean, he's going to be the volume guy. Not probably going to be a whole lot of time to pass down the field, but even when there is, this is a bad secondary in Atlanta, so very exploitable. And Jason Witten, while he's not the big play threat, he's certainly a volume guy, and he's a great red zone target.
Yeah, I mean, even banged up, I think you can easily get 6-7 catches for 50, 60 yards and maybe a touchdown out of him. And, his price didn't go up at all. So, I mean, without Tony Romo there, Romo, you had to worry about him spreading the ball around a ton because he's a really good decision maker and buys time in the pocket. Whedon's just going to be throwing to his reads, which is going to be, in my opinion, Terrence Williams, Jason Witten. So I expect the targets to be better than they would have been with Romo, even though they might not be as efficient. I mean, you could see a lot of 13 target, 7 catch games from Witten, assuming he's playing, which, like you said, I expect him to be. He played through most of this last week until the game got a little bit out of hand there, and he took some rest at that point. But if he can run, he's going to be out there, and he's not a guy that relied on speed in the first place. So, I mean, he's going to be running his routes and should be in good shape for a solid cash game type of play with some upside based on touchdowns.
Yeah, and it certainly seems like he's a safe bet to get the most targets in this offense, especially the short passing game. So, great call there. And that's going to wrap things up. Find us on Twitter at DF Cafe. Subscribe to this YouTube channel. Lots of other great content covering every position in NFL and all the other sports at dailyfantasycafe.com.